You may think you are reacting to what's happening now. Most of the time you're not. When a small event causes a huge reaction, something older is speaking. Greek philosophy had a word for this, pathos. Not emotion, something acting through you. And that may change how you understand yourself forever. Every time you explode, every time you shut down or try too hard for something, it's not your present speaking, it is something older, something that was never actually finished. Most people in the self-improvement space try to fix their reactions and their triggers. But what they are actually doing is working on the symptoms, not the cause. And pathos doesn't mean emotion or passion. It means something that happens to you. It comes from the verb pascho, which means to suffer, to undergo, to be acted upon.
And look at what pascho actually contains. This is from an ancient Greek dictionary called Stamatakos. The Greeks had a phrase, iti pathimi, if something were to happen to me. This was kind of the polite way of saying, if I die. Death was just something that happens to you. It is the ultimate passive experience. But there is something more interesting buried in the same dictionary. The word antipeponthos, anti, against, in return of something, and peponthos is from the perfect form of pascho, something that has already been suffered and stayed. Antipeponthos means what you do to others because of what was done to you. Not revenge, not choice, not character. It is a transmission. The thing you underwent and never processed becomes the thing you pass on. For example, the parent who was never seen, raising a child who will spend their life seeking to be seen. The person who learned that love comes with conditions, loving conditionally. The one who was taught that safety means control, controlling everything around them, and so on. They are not bad people, they are antipeponthos people, running what was given to them, passing on what was never translated. So this is not about blame, it is about interruption. You cannot change what was done to you, but you can be the generation where the transmission stops. And this brings us to a word that most people think is Eastern, karma. As a concept that it is Eastern. We associate it with Buddhism, with Hinduism, with something exotic, something from over there. But the ancient Greek world, as well as the Roman world, had the same concept. They just named it differently. They called it antipeponthos. What you undergo and never process, you transmit. And what you transmit shapes the next person's pathos and so on. And their unprocessed pathos becomes someone else's inheritance. That's karma. Not mystical, not cosmic, psychological, generational, and mechanical. Most people think karma happens in the next life, or that you do something and karma will find you eventually, or that you live a life because of your karma. No, it is not exactly like that. It doesn't wait for the next life. It happens in this one, and it happens instantly. In the same family, in the same relationship, something in the same conversation even. You don't need to believe in reincarnation to see it work. You just need to look at any family closely enough. The wound travels until someone decides to look at it directly. That's not spirituality, that's logos applied to pathos.
In antiquity, pathos referred to anything a person undergoes, including suffering, psychological states, emotions like fear or pleasure, or even catastrophe. something that moves you while you believe you are the one doing the moving. Passion is memory without reason, memory that was never passed through interpretation. And whatever is never interpreted rules from the dark. And here's the real catch. Every technique of persuasion, of marketing, of manipulation, anything that is designed to move a person towards something works precisely on this complex, on this unprocessed memory. If you genuinely want to understand a person, including yourself, don't look at their beliefs. That's the surface. Those are the symptoms. Look at the causes. The lie of the adult. There is a word that has caused enormous damage, adult, as if it were a destination, as you arrive at a station one day and the whole journey is over. So the world says, you are grown up now, you need to act maturely, stop acting like a child. But here's the truth. A person doesn't mature because time passes. Time grows the body. The soul only grows when it is illuminated. Greek philosophy didn't have a grown-up. It had παιδεία, education, as formation. It had askesis, which is the deliberate practice. It had self-knowledge.
Most people translate παιδεία as education, but that's too small of a word. Look at the root pes. It means the child. Παιδεία literally means the process of the child, not leaving childhood behind, but carrying something of it forward. The openness, the capacity to be shaped, and the willingness to not already know. And right next to it, in the language, we have pegnion. Pegnion means play. Not the opposite of seriousness, but the mode of encountering the world without your defenses up. And the Greeks even had the word pedotrivis, which literally means the one who rubs the child. He is the trainer, the one who did not just teach technique, but worked the whole person, body and soul together. The Greeks didn't have a public education system. They had teachers, chosen carefully by the family for this child with this nature at this moment in their formation. The pedotrivis for the body, the grammatistis for letters, the kitharistis for music, and above all, the philosopher, the one who asked questions the child couldn't yet answer, so the child wouldn't spend their life learning to answer them. Each teacher selected not by a ministry, not by a curriculum, but by a parent who understood that formation is too important to delegate. Because παιδεία was never meant to be a system, the moment it becomes a system, it stops being παιδεία, it becomes something else. It becomes compliance. A system does not want formed humans, it wants functional ones. Humans who know enough to be useful, not enough to be dangerous. The Greeks understood that the state and the soul might have different interests, and they kept the formation of the soul out of the state's hands. We forgot that. And now we wonder why so few people know who they are. So, when the Greeks said παιδεία, they weren't describing a school system. They were describing a stance toward existence. Stay formed, stay open, and stay in constant motion. The adult who thinks they are finished, who has nothing left to learn, no edges left to sand, that person in Greek terms has stopped being a pes. The moment you stop being able to learn, you stop growing, and you just start repeating.
There is no I am done, there is only I am working. And that's why you see people today with ties, with suits, with titles, with companies, with families, collapsing over a text that never came, or exploding because someone cut them off in traffic, or I don't know, collapsing because they were not invited to an event or whatever. And then you think, how is that possible? Yet it is entirely possible, because what's speaking isn't their age. What's speaking is this silent memory. Every destructive behavior exists because of ignorance and because of grief. The disproportionate reaction is the trail. There is one principle, like a law. You'll see it applied everywhere. When the reaction is bigger than the actual event, you're not reacting to the present, you are reacting to something older. And this is the key to reading both yourself and people. The other person isn't angry because of what you said. They are angry because you pressed a spot where they once felt small or uncomfortable or betrayed. They are not afraid because the plan has changed. They are afraid because they once lived in a plan that changed without warning. And they are not seeking validation because they are egotistical. They are seeking validation because their existence was once threatened. And this is where real philosophy begins, because here you stop seeing characters, you start seeing mechanisms. The truth is that we haven't grown up. What we have done is downloaded programs to run on. And then we say to ourselves, I'm overreacting, or I'm insecure, or I'm too sensitive, or whatever. We are nothing of those things. We are just running old software.
And Aristotle saw this, not as psychology, as strategy. In the rhetoric, he breaks down persuasion in 3 elements. Most people know the first 2. Ethos, the credibility of the speaker, and logos, not as the universal proportion, but as logos, the word, the argument itself. But the third one is the one that actually moves people, pathos. And here is what most people miss out about Aristotle's definition. Pathos in rhetoric is not what the speaker feels, it is what gets activated inside the listener. The speaker doesn't create the emotion, they just find the door that is already there and open it. Think about it for a second. Every politician who has ever made you afraid, they didn't create your fear, they found a fear that was already living in you, unprocessed, unnamed, and they gave it a target. Every advertisement that made you feel inadequate, it didn't plant the inadequacy, it found the old wound, the one that says you are not enough, and it sold you the solution to a problem it didn't create. Every leader who made you feel like you finally belonged, they didn't give you belonging, they found the hunger that was already there, that deep need, and they positioned themselves as the answer. This is not manipulation as an accident, this is manipulation as a system. Aristotle called it pathos because he understood that you don't persuade a person through their reason, you persuade them through their unfinished history. And the only protection, the only thing that makes you unpersuadable is knowing your own pathos before someone else uses it. That's not therapy, that's armor.
3 things move a human being, not 1,000. The modern world loves complexity, many symptoms, many diagnoses, many types of people. Greek philosophy is harder. It cuts the unnecessary and leaves the very essential. In reality, a human being revolves around 3 core anxieties. Do I belong? Am I safe? Am I recognized? These aren't just social needs, they are existential needs.
Let's use some Greek terminology. We have philia, friendship, homeosis, connection under common understanding, not being a stranger in the world, not just belonging, but resemblance, recognition of self in the other. And buried in the same root, we have filtron, filter, from philo, to love. A filter, not mechanical filtering, but the process of choosing what you let through, what you let matter. Philia implies exactly this, a dialectical process with yourself and others. You don't just have friends, you filter the world through them and they through you. That's when you really belong, not when you are accepted, but when you are recognized. And from there we get the word Philadelphia, friendship and brotherhood. Asphalia, alpha plus phalo, which means safety, not falling, not collapsing. The root sphalo originally meant to make someone fall, to throw down, to overturn. So safety isn't about comfort, it is the ground not giving way beneath you. Τιμή and axiosis, it is honor and worth, having a place, having weight, not fame, not applause, the sense that your existence counts.
Now notice the dangerous part. When any of these three parameters is wounded early, the person doesn't get over it. They carry it like a hidden architecture. And this architecture writes everything: relationships, careers, friendships, ambitions, addictions, whatever. And all three rest on the same foundations: the spirited part and the desiring part.
Plato called them επιθυμητικόν and θυμοειδές. The επιθυμητικόν is the desiring part, hunger, appetite. It is the part that wants, be it connection, pleasure, safety. The θυμοειδές is the spirited part, not anger exactly, more like the part that needs to matter, that either turns to rage or collapses into shame when you are ignored. Belonging lives in both, safety lives in both, recognition lives in both. And when either one is wounded early, the whole architecture shifts. Everything gets built around protecting that wound.
Passion, pathos, the old thing that rules as if it were present. Let me say this plainly. Many people are not living their lives. They are living the repetition of an old feeling. And that feeling has three forms. A, I want people to like me. And this isn't sociability, it is the fear of exile. You go inside a room, you scan the room, you count glances, you adjust your tone without even realizing it, and then you manage your own face to the world. You don't do it because you are polite, you do it because something inside you is a memory that says, if I'm not liked, I will lose my place. B, I want to be safe. This isn't rational caution, it is the body waiting for punishment. Someone criticizes you and then you don't just receive it as information, you receive it as a threat. You tighten, you freeze, or you attack because your psyche remembers that when I hear tension, something bad is coming. C, I want to be chosen. I want to be special. This isn't romanticism, it is an ancient need for recognition. That's why you overtry. And that's why you exhaust yourself. And that's why when you are not recognized, you don't just get angry, you collapse. Because the old law was that if I'm not chosen, if I'm not this special thing, I don't exist. This is again pathos. And pathos means that the old appears as present because it never passed through filtering, through reason. Reason as decoder. Now we will talk about something that the modern world doesn't want to hear. You don't need to fix yourself. You need to be able to read yourself, not with reassuring words, with reason. In Greek philosophy, reason has nothing to do with what we say today, positive thinking. Reason is the capacity for filtering and discernment. Reason doesn't say calm down. It says, this feeling you have, where does it come from? And that's where the transformation happens. Because the moment a person sees the cause, the passion loses its anonymity. And whatever loses its anonymity ceases to be a demon dragging you. The test. Who is speaking inside you right now? Here is a little test, not a self-help exercise. It is a diagnostic test. When you catch yourself reacting, ask, which part of me is afraid of rejection, for example? Which part of me is afraid of failing? Which part of me is afraid of going unrecognized? And then do something that most people can't stand. Do nothing. Just watch it. Because humans have one passion above all. They have the urge to fix things immediately. But you cannot do that. You need to first see it, understand it, know it, name the pathos, and only then you move to action. Say, for example, you are 40 years old. You post something that matters to you, and then you check every few minutes, not many likes, not many comments, not many shares. Suddenly, you're not 40 anymore. You are the child who showed something with pride and no one turned to look. It wasn't the algorithm hurting you, it was the absence of attention. You do something good for someone, you help them, you give time, you give energy, and then you wait, not consciously, physically. You wait for a well done, for recognition, for a sign that you matter. And when it doesn't come, you don't just get angry, you empty out. That is not generosity. It is an old request saying to you, see me so I can exist, so I can matter. You work excessively, not because the job demands it, but because you can't stand the idea of being considered mediocre. You're not chasing success, you are running away from the feeling that you were not enough. Someone changes their tone, not their voice, their tone. And your body tightens before you can even think. You get agitated, stressed, like a storm is coming. You are not oversensitive, you are trained to react in this way. Because once a shift in tone meant trouble. Someone says, we need to talk. And before you even know it, before you even know what it is about, your stomach is already upset. You're not afraid of the conversation, you are afraid of the unpredictable, because you learned early in your life that things can change without warning. You walk into a room, and before you speak, you have already measured yourself, how you stand, how you look, whether you fit, you look around. You're not observing others, you are scanning yourself through their eyes. And here's the takeaway of this video. In none of these moments, you are reacting to the present. You are reacting to an old question that was never answered. This is not about anger, this is not about insecurity, this is not about weakness of character. This is memory that never became reason. Why this is political and not just personal? A system doesn't want people with reason. It wants people with pathos, who believe it's their personality. Because the person with unspoken memory is manipulated through acceptance and rejection, buys safety, chases validation, and so they are kept in a loop. Παιδεία, which was the old school Greek education, breaks the loop. That's why it has always been dangerous. There are only two types of people: those who keep growing and those who pretend they do not need to grow. Behavior is an encrypted file of grief. Your job as a human being is to become the decryption key. If you take only one thing from this video, take this: you are not whatever you do when you react. You are the one who can see the reaction. And the moment you see the reaction, that is the moment a reason is born. And when a reason is born, the passion doesn't disappear, but it ceases to rule like a king. Because something higher than memory begins to exist within you: interpretation, Hermes. And whatever is interpreted no longer needs to scream. The prosopon, not a mask, but a direct presence. There is a word that, if you take it seriously, demolishes all modern psychology of role-playing. And the word is prosopon, not face as we use it today, prosopon. If we break it down etymologically, something very dangerous is revealed. Prosopon, pros plus ops. Pros means direction, relation, a turning towards something. Ops, from opopa, the verb, means vision, manifestation, having seen. Not stillness, movement through the very relation and sight. Prosopon is not a biological given, it is a stance of existence. The etymological magnum says that prosopon is that which has eyes not turned sideways, but directed straight ahead. And it adds something even harder. Διό και μόνης ανθρώπης επικατηγορείται. It is attributed with precision only to the human being. Why? Because prosopon requires direct vision, conscious presence, reference toward the other. Animals have a face, opsis. They have a head, a mouth. But the vision is lateral. It is all about survival, about fear, about instinct. The human being faces forward because they are made for encounter, not for flight, not for a role, not for a mask. Prosopon versus prosopion. Here is where the crime happens. Prosopon is the disclosure of being. Prosopion is the mask. It is a theatrical term, a role worn for performance. Later, this passes into Latin as persona, and it is used by Carl Jung. But notice, Jung uses persona to describe exactly the opposite of what Greek thought calls prosopon. The Jungian persona is a social mask, a functional role, a necessary fiction for navigating the world. Prosopon is directness, the assumption of responsibility, presence without a sideways glance. Not who I think I am, but how I am revealed to the world. Loss of face equals loss of directness. When we say he lost face, he has no face, we're not being moralistic, we are speaking ontologically and we don't even realize it. It means they can no longer stand straight. And what happens then? The prosopions multiply. The profiles, the roles, the personas. But prosopon disappears. And the mask is what? The mask is something static, something motionless, something dead. Prosopon is something dynamic, alive, and relational. And this explains why today the masks are growing and the masks are screaming at each other and faces grow scarce. Epictetus and the upright face. Epictetus says it without any psychology.
Consider who you are first, a human being holding nothing more sovereign than deliberate choice.
The human being is defined by proeresis, the capacity to stand free before any pathos. And then he continues,
You have been separated through reason from beasts and from sheep.
If your proeresis surrenders to the passions, to the pathos, the prosopon is lost. And then the human being either becomes a beast or it becomes a sheep. The modern world, the circus of personas. Today we don't live in a society of prosopa, we live in a society of the faceless. We have TV personalities, politicians, journalists, influencers, personas invading screens and pinning their masks onto ours. And then we fight persona against persona in collisions of impressions inside a circus that is called modern civilization. The masks are screaming, but the faces are absent.